Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping into a topic that's been making some pretty big waves semaglutide.
hmm
But hang on, if you're thinking we're just gonna, dissect the drug itself, its chemistry, side effects, all that,
Yeah.
well, that's not really our focus today.
No, not the pharmacology deep dive this time.
Exactly. Instead, we're exploring something far more personal and honestly pretty profound. It's about what happens when, for a lot of people, food cravings suddenly just disappear, like
Yeah.
gone. So, our mission really is to understand that quiet window, as our source calls it,
Mhm.
what it reveals about our relationship with food, and maybe even more deeply about ourselves.
Well, yeah.
We've got this incredible framework to guide us, drawing from insights and personal stories shared by an expert named Dan Hollis.
He has a really unique perspective on
He
this.
really does. So, this isn't just about the numbers on the scale, It's about a deeper, very human story unfolding. Okay, let's unpack
Let's
this.
do it.
We're going to start with Kate. She's a 46-year-old mother. A couple of months into her semaglutide prescription, the expected stuff was happening, weight coming off, health markers looking better.
The typical results people hear about.
Right. But for Kate, the most startling change, the thing that really stopped her in her tracks, wasn't the weight loss. It was, and this is her phrase, the craving that didn't show up.
Ah, okay.
Before this, Kate described her life as lived by this very specific rhythm with food. That afternoon slump always meant chips, feeling a bit lonely. Bread was the go-to.
Using food to manage feelings, basically.
Totally. Celebrating something. Cake. Because joy, for her, always needed to be sweetened, I guess.
It's a very common pattern.
Then came this moment she shared with Dan Hollis. She said, I walked past the pantry, and for the first time in 20 years, nothing reached back.
Wow.
Can you just imagine that kind of silence for someone who's lived with that constant internal noise for decades?
And that quiet moment Kate described, that's exactly what Dan Hollis calls the quiet window. He puts it like this. That's the moment where the food stops answering your questions and the real ones start talking.
Mm.
It's a remarkable shift, and it's surprisingly common for those who experience it this way.
When Kate said she felt like a ghost in her own kitchen, that really hit me. This idea of, almost a kind of grief over losing a coping mechanism, even if it was a negative one. Is grief too strong a word, or is that genuinely something Dan Hollis sees?
It might sound a bit extreme at first, yeah, but Dan really emphasizes that for many people, food was so much more than just fuel. It was this deeply ingrained system for managing emotions, for comfort, for a sense of normal even.
Right, the rhythm she mentioned.
Exactly. So when that system is suddenly quieted, that void, it can genuinely feel like disorientation or even, yeah, a form of grease. Not necessarily missing the food, but losing that familiar emotional crutch.
So it's the loss of the signal itself.
Precisely. Kate didn't miss the actual food. She missed the signal, the rhythm, the self-story that said, at least I know how to feel full. Her brain felt, as she put it, like a library after hours, suddenly quiet, maybe a little unsettling.
Yeah, that makes sense. That shift, this whole quiet window thing Kate went through, it leads right into Dan Hollis's really, I think, profound insight about semaglutide. He says, semaglutide doesn't fix you. It gives you space to fix yourself. That feels like a pretty radical reframe. Can you maybe elaborate on why that's not just like a small difference in wording, but a fundamental rethink?
Absolutely. I mean, it really challenges that passive idea many might have, that you take a drug and it just solves the problem for you.
Right, like magic.
Exactly. But Dan argues it's more like someone suddenly soundproofed a noisy room. It creates the silence you need to finally hear yourself think.
Yeah.
He sees hunger, or cravings really, not just physically, but as a stand-in.
A stand-in.
Yeah. A surrogate for meaning, comfort, escape. So when semaglutide quiets that signal, he says, the static goes away. And what's left can be startling. So it stops being just about calories and starts being about, well, what was that craving actually masking?
And that's why Dan poses those really fundamental, maybe sometimes uncomfortable questions, right? Like, what am I hungry for when I'm not hungry? Who am I without the chase? What's left when the noise goes?
Exactly. Those are the big ones.
So what kinds of answers do people start finding when they're in that quiet space? Does he talk about that?
Yeah, he does. And often the answers are uncomfortable at first because they point to those deeper hungers, for connection, for purpose, maybe just for genuine rest or self-compassion. Things food could temporarily numb but never really satisfy.
Okay.
So Dan sees semaglutide less as a prescription and more as a pause button, It doesn't magically fix those deeper issues, not at all.
Uh,
But it clears the runway, as he puts it, so you can finally see what's trying to
it
land.
gives you a chance, basically.
A moment of clarity that maybe wasn't possible before, and the opportunity to consciously start addressing those real needs.
Okay, so in this profound quiet, you're suddenly confronted with these deeper questions. What kind of actual practical help or tools does Dan Hollis offer people then to sort of navigate this new landscape? He talks about scaffolding. What does that look like? Is it therapy, support groups?
Well, Dan's pretty clear it's not about just pep talks or, rah-rah motivation, which often just fills out anyway.
Right.
He's talking about building actual, tangible scaffolding. He uses this great analogy, saying semaglutide is like good lumber.
Good lumber. Okay.
Yeah, it's a powerful tool. It makes building possible, but it's still just lumber. It isn't the house itself. You still have to be, in his words, ready to do the work. The medication enables, but it doesn't, complete the construction for you.
And this connects to a really crucial point he makes about why people often struggle long term. He points out most people don't fail because the medication doesn't work. They fail because they were alone.
That's a huge insight.
So what does it mean to not be alone in this context? What kind of support are we talking about?
It means understanding something really fundamental. Your identity doesn't instantly catch up with your body's physical changes. Dan really emphasizes this. Your body changes faster than your identity.
Ah, okay, that's interesting.
You lose the physical craving, maybe pretty quickly, but those mental and emotional patterns that self-story Kate mentioned, they're still deeply wired in.
The habits, the thoughts.
Exactly. And this is precisely why that scaffolding is so critical.
Yeah.
And he's not just talking about, having someone to chat with. He means actual neurobiological replacement structures.
Whoa, okay. Neurobiological replacement structures. That sounds intense.
It does, but think about it like this. Rituals, rhythm, routines, the things you do. He calls it the lattice that keeps people upright when the chemistry wobbles.
Okay, so neurobiological replacement structures.
Yeah.
For our listeners, what does that practically mean? Are we talking about literally rewiring your brain, or is it more about consciously building new habits until they stick?
It's kind of both, actually. When those old neural pathways tied to comfort eating start to quiet down because the drug is working, there's a bit of a vacuum, right?
Makes sense.
So neurobiological refers to the brain's ability to change its plasticity. It can form new connections. So these rituals, rhythm routines, they aren't just like good habits you should do. They actively help build new, healthier pathways in the brain.
Ah, I see. So they serve the same needs, maybe. Comfort, stability, dealing with stress, but without automatically reaching for food.
Precisely. You're essentially giving the brain new, more adaptive maps for navigating your emotional world. That's why Dan reinforces that support isn't optional. It's neurobiological scaffolding.
Wow.
It really reframes it, doesn't it? It makes it less about willpower and more about, well, he calls it a human architecture story.
Okay, human architecture story. I like
Yeah.
that. So if support is this neurobiological scaffolding, what does calling it a human architecture story really imply? Is it about building a stronger, more resilient self?
That's exactly it. Think about it. Your identity, your coping mechanisms, they sort of form your personal architecture, right? How you're built emotionally.
Okay.
When semaglutide takes away a major pillar, that food-based coping strategy, you need new structural elements, that scaffolding, to keep everything from getting wobbly or even collapsing. It's about intentionally designing and building a new way of being, one that's robust enough to handle life's stresses when they inevitably come.
So given all this complexity, this internal architecture work, what does it actually mean to win on this journey? For Dan Hollis, it seems like success isn't just about hitting a certain number on the scale.
Not at all.
He offers this really powerful redefinition. This journey isn't about eating less. It's about living more.
And that's such a radical shift in the win condition. It moves completely away from external things, the scale, the clothing size, to an internal state.
Which is.
It's about whether or not someone feels alive enough to stop measuring everything by food. That's the real goal.
Freedom from the constant food thoughts, basically.
Exactly. Having the mental space to actually engage with life in new ways. We heard about Sarah, for instance. She used to unwind by baking constantly. When that urge just faded on semaglutide, she deliberately started this evening journaling ritual instead, slowly rewriting her "I'm stressed, so I bake" narrative into one of "I reflect and grow when I'm stressed."
That's a concrete example of building that new structure. But the big challenge, of course, is making it stick, sustain change. And Dan has this really wise observation. Weight loss is biology. Staying there is narrative.
Yeah, that line really resonates.
What exactly does he mean by that? That success isn't just about the biology working?
He means that people often regain weight or fall back into old patterns, not because they suddenly lack discipline or the drug stops working entirely, but because, well, they lose the weight
Yeah.
physically, but they never actually rewrite their inner story.
The narrative part.
Right. They experience that quiet, but they don't build anything in that space. So when the old triggers pop up or life gets tough, they just go back to what's familiar, what's known,
Because the new narrative wasn't strong enough yet.
or wasn't even consciously built. So Dan's ultimate goal with the scaffolding and everything is to prevent that silence from just becoming a waiting room for relapse.
Yeah.
It's about actively filling that space with new structure, community, identity, purpose, and time. All those things food might have been substituting for.
And it's not about achieving some kind of perfection,
Right.
right, or being totally fixed. It sounds more like just being present. Like he says, being here in the quiet, listening.
Exactly.
Like Kate's journey, which wasn't about some huge overnight transformation, but those small, consistent wins. A Wednesday where she didn't snack through her sadness. A Thursday where she drank tea instead of opening a second bottle.
Tiny shifts, but they add up.
Yeah, and a Sunday where she took a walk, not because it burned calories, but because it felt like a conversation with her future self. I mean, that just paints such a vivid picture of what that living more actually looks like day to day.
It really does. It's about the quality of life, not just the quantity of food.
So ultimately, Dan Hollis is pretty clear that using something like semaglutide isn't cheating. He calls it adaptation. He even pushes it further, saying the real cheat was pretending willpower was enough all along.
That's a provocative line.
It is, and while that's a compelling perspective, I imagine some people might still really grapple with feeling like they failed somehow if they need medication for something they feel should just be about willpower. How does Dan address that very real internal conflict?
He really brings it back to compassion and reframing. He points out that for so many people, that willpower battle was essentially a fight against their own biology, against these deeply ingrained neural pathways we talked about.
A fight they were maybe set up to lose.
Often, yeah. So semaglutide, in Dan's view, just levels the playing field. It creates a genuine opportunity for real sustainable change, where pure willpower for many just couldn't get traction.
Yeah.
He emphasizes that the healing process, the rebuilding, is quiet. It's intentional.
Not quick or easy.
No, it's the slow layering of new choices, new thoughts, and new systems, all built during that sacred window that semaglutide creates. It takes time and conscious effort.
And his most profound takeaway from all this, what's the final thought?
It's powerful. He says it's not about becoming someone else. It's about finally having the space to become yourself.
Wow. Okay, so a final thought then, maybe for you listening. If you find yourself in that quiet window, maybe after a craving just doesn't show up like it used to and it unsettles you, maybe more than you expected, just know this. You're not broken. You're just beginning to hear yourself again. Welcome to the quiet window. You're definitely not alone here.